Hey everyone, I'm Amber. Welcome to week 6. This week we're going to start talking about how to teach. This following presentation is going to contain some important tips for your instructional skills lesson. On this first page you see an image of a character holding a magnifier, a set of tools, and a pair of hands on a page of Braille. These are all things that come to mind for me as I think about tools that we need for teaching. I love the image on this page, a boat on a lake framed by trees at sunset with two people fishing. It's one of my favorite proverbs. Give a man a fish to feed him for a day, teach a man to fish to feed him for a lifetime. We think about how often we hand things to our students, or things just appear out of nowhere. What a difference it makes when a student's able to locate their materials and ready themselves to learn on their own. We need to teach them how to fish. Some components of teaching for a TVI are knowing when to move from assessment to instruction, knowing about explicit teaching and the gradual release of responsibility, and we're going to talk about these things in this presentation, identifying the differences between accommodations and modifications, and then finally I'm going to give you some tips and examples for teaching beginning Braille readers. And over the next 3 weeks, we're going to talk about different kind of Braille readers. This week, I wanted to focus on beginning Braille readers. Next week, I'll talk a little bit more about students who have behavioral challenges who are learning Braille. And then in the following week, we'll talk about older students or students who are not at the beginning level anymore. One important point that Dr. Conroy and I really wanted to make is that assessment is not instruction. Assessment's going to drive your instruction, and you need to be able to use your assessment results to design the steps that you're going to take to teach. But assessment doesn't count as teaching. It's a component of it, but it's not the art of teaching. And so you're going to use your assessment to set goals and design objectives to meet those goals, and then teach to those objectives. One trap that I found myself falling into as a beginning teacher was that I became almost hyper-focused on assessment. And as you gain skills and confidence, you're going to begin to use your running notes as your ongoing assessments, and good note-taking will save you time. I'm going to tell you that if you're being observed or evaluated for your performance evaluation, your principal or your supervisor isn't going to want to see you conducting assessment. They're going to want to see you teaching based on the information that you receive from your assessment. So assessment gives you the rationale as to why you're teaching what you're teaching. The components of explicit teaching are on this slide. There are 4 main components: purpose and rationale, clear expectations and demonstrations, supported practice with feedback, and mastery. I want to lay the groundwork for this concept this week, the concept of explicit teaching and the release of responsibility to students. And I want you guys to start thinking about what it means to be explicit and purposeful in your teaching. Next week, we're going to watch a couple of videos and spend time considering what good teaching looks like for teachers who give instruction in a one-to-one setting. But the purpose and rationale, that is our job. That's what we come up with. Why is the lesson important? Why does the student need to learn what we're teaching them? When we set clear expectations and provide demonstrations, we're doing that from the start. Our students need to hear and see what our expectations are and what we want them to do. We're going to model things for them and with them, and then have them gradually do those things independently. Supported practice with feedback. This is where practice will occur. You have to think about what's the best setting. Does the student need pre-teaching of the concept before they do it in the general education setting? Or is it something that can be gleaned from the general classroom instruction, and the student can independently begin to practice and receive feedback from that classroom teacher? So this is where your collaboration with the classroom teacher comes into play. And finally, mastery, which for us, our students and all students means independence. Douglas Fisher and Nancy Frey have done a lot of work on this gradual release of responsibility framework, and it was originally developed for reading instruction, and it is reflective of several different learning theories. And I'm going to let you guys dig into this slide a little bit further, slide 7, on your PowerPoints. But taken together, these theories suggest that learning occurs through interaction with others. And when these interactions are intentional, specific learning occurs. And we're going to revisit this again in week 7, but I really want you to review this slide and think about the model on this slide and how our goal is to have students achieve mastery and independence with tasks. You're going to think about the slices of the triangle. What part is focused instruction of your lesson? What part's guided? Where is the collaborative learning occurring? And at what point is the student doing it alone? And when the student's doing it alone, that's when they are taking responsibility for their learning and achieving mastery. This can be hard for some of our students, the collaborative learning and independent learning part. Many of our students will have to work twice as hard or more than the majority of their peers to get to the collaborative learning stage. So how are we preparing students for collaborative learning, and how are they preparing themselves for this slice? That's going to be a big component of how you design your individualized education program. Dr. Conroy and I were just talking about this, and it comes up a lot in schools, accommodations or modifications. We wanted to include this slide because there's a lot of confusion about accommodations and modifications. You're going to work with your students' teams to identify whether accommodations, which just change the mode of access, are needed for students. When you modify an assignment, you're changing the expectation of the assignment. The student's no longer doing the same work. Historically, many people believe that students with special needs had to have modified work, but this is simply not true. Some will need it, but certainly not all. You have to think about when you change the expectation of a lesson, you are changing outcomes for a student. You're changing what their focus is and what they're working on, and you're changing the opportunity for them to be competitive with their peers and themselves. So got to really think about whether or not you're going to be altering the way they do the assignment, or which is the way they do the assignment is the accommodation, whether they're doing an assignment in Braille or using technology or maybe magnification, or if you're going to change or shorten the assignment, which is a modification. I want to talk a little bit about explicit teaching and what the gradual release of responsibility for a beginning Braille reader might look like. It might look like a lesson where you demonstrate tactile discrimination to find a shape that's different from others in a line of shapes. So first, you need to tell the student what you're doing. For example, today we're going to learn about how to find something that's different from the rest. And then you're going to tell them why you're doing it. This is important, and this is going to help because it's going to help us learn to be readers, and it will help us learn about the idea of things being the same or different. And then you're going to model tracking the line. Maybe you'll say something like, let your hands ride along with me as my fingers find the triangle and the row of circles. Here we go. We move across the line and get excited. Yay, we found it. And then you're going to facilitate practice. Now it's the student's turn. And after they demonstrate that they've done it, oh, you did such a great job. Here are 4 stickers. Now go through the page and find the triangle on each line. And when you finish that, you're going to close and tell them, here's what you learned today, or ask them what they learned today. What did you learn today? Why was it important? Where might you use this skill, again, in the classroom setting or at home? We're always thinking about what's important in our lessons. Are our students ready to learn? Why are they going to want to learn from us? We have to make it relevant, and we have to be the expert. And one thing I thought of while I was driving was this analogy of making a sandwich. Okay, we all know that too many carbs, especially bad carbs, will weigh us down. And to me, I think about how much prompting TVIs give to students. Well, prompts are the carbs of what we do. We have to get away from constant prompting. If our goal is independence, we need to set high expectations early on for students to complete tasks without constant prompts and reminders. So if you think about making a sandwich, if teaching's making a sandwich and the prompting's the bread, and all you get is bread in your sandwich, it's not going to be very delicious or nutritious. You need to add the vegetables and the cheese and the meat. That's the teaching part. Those are the parts of the sandwich that show relevance, importance, that model, that allow for practice, and that ultimately nourish by providing independent skills to that child. So just some closing thoughts on the gradual release of responsibility model. This model that we covered a little bit here, and again, we're going to get more into it in the next 2 weeks. It just makes me think about the Olympics. You know, it's an inspiring time to watch people strive to be their personal best. And behind each athlete are a line of coaches. And I view teaching, aspects of teaching, much like coaching. We have to show kids why what they're learning is important and relevant. That's the purpose. Then we coach them to independence with appropriate challenges and encouragement. So we talk about independence and the importance of independence in our field. Gradually releasing the student to be independent in a skill or a task is the path to independence. Don't hang on too long. Let them go. Give students the dignity of risk. They have to be able to learn to use the skills you're giving them across in different environments. We learn from our failures. Communicate with families and staff about the expectations and accountability you want that student to be held to, so that they can have the dignity of failing and learning from their failures. Informed collaboration is really key. You are the blindness expert. Establish your expertise and use it to inform those recommendations you make on accommodations and modifications. These things, these accommodations are important because, and explain to the team why they're important. It's important that Amber learns how to get her Braille writer out and start writing at the writing prompt, because if the Braille writer just shows up every day on her desk with a piece of paper already in it, Amber's never going to learn how to prepare herself to be a member of the classroom. And my closing point, I just feel like this is so important, to be mindful and avoid becoming an on-site curriculum modifier. Again, modifications and accommodations are two different things. If you are sitting in a classroom and constantly changing assignments and lowering expectations for the student, you're demonstrating to the student and all of their peers and their team that they don't need to be held accountable for the same amount of work. So make sure that you're very careful about your presence in the classroom, and when you get involved with changing or altering any kinds of assignments. Okay, our students are going to have to work really hard to stay up and be competitive with their peers, and that's not going to change throughout the course of their life. People who are blind have to learn early on to what they need to do to be competitive in the classroom and work environments. And it's our job to support that and to keep the expectations high. They deserve that. Thanks a lot, guys. Please reach out to me if you've got any questions, and have a great week learning.